Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Saturday afternoon, Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, land one of the more intriguing prospects in this 2025 cycle, in-state kid in Jackson Carpenter from Lincoln, Nebraska. And when you dive into Jackson Carpenter, I think the first thing that you got to talk about is this is a Matt Rhule kind of guy. You look back at Matt Rhule's time at Temple, you look at Matt Rhule's time at Baylor. He covets these kind of kids that are not necessarily the high-profile kids according to 24/7 Sports or On3, but you take a look at Jackson Carpenter in the athletic profile that makes him up, a 10.7 in the 100-meter dash, a 39-inch vertical, a background of both basketball and track and field. Matt Rhule has shown that on the recruiting trail, he wants premier athletes. Jackson Carpenter is a premier athlete. Hey, we're going to get you on campus. We're going to get you to be a good football player. But that's something that Matt Rhule has always really practiced going back to his time at Baylor or Temple is regardless of what you're evaluated as a football player, let me look at the athletic background. Let me take the best athletes from the high school ranks, get them coached up, developed up. And I think Jackson Carpenter kind of signifies that type of approach for Matt Rhule and this coaching staff. Really excited kid. Want to dive into the film, talk a little bit about what he brings to this Nebraska team. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. A massive shout out to the Nebraska fans. Y'all know I love talking this program, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, whether we're talking spring practice. The amount of support y'all have shown the fellas truly does mean a lot. So if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Jackson Carpenter. And again, I think you got to start with a couple of different things that you're really like. One, legacy. Dad was a national champion at Nebraska. But more importantly, I love the athletic makeup for Jackson Carpenter, right? 6'2", 185, runs a 10.7 in the 100-meter, a 39-inch vertical. Now, I think that gets us into the conversation of where does Jackson Carpenter come in and play for Nebraska? Watching the film late last night, I mean, I pretty clearly see wide receiver. He checks a lot of boxes in terms of what you want at that wide receiver position. One, very good frame, 6'2", 185, probably gets up to 200 pounds at some point during his playing career at Nebraska. Elite speed, 10.75, elite vertical, 39-inch vertical, and then a basketball background. So you're talking about a guy that can win vertically, win with that football in the air. And I'll say this about his basketball background. You turn on the film, it is pretty clear that he's a basketball player during the winters. This is a guy that when that football is in the air, he is consistently high pointing it, being physical at the catch point. Those are all things that kind of translate to the basketball court. I think Jackson Carpenter certainly shows all of those traits. So when you kind of take a look at the overall athletic profile with the really appealing frame, the long speed, the basketball background, I see wide receiver for Nebraska, and I see a guy that can really win vertically as a wide receiver during his time at Nebraska. We all talk about Dylan Rhule being able to push the ball down the field. You want to get wide receivers that can win down the field for him. I think Jackson Carpenter is certainly one of those guys, and you get into the film here, and I think this is really kind of solidifies why we think he's a wide receiver. Jackson Carpenter, not only elite working down the field with that speed, I love what he can do high pointing the football. And again, that's a basketball type of thing where when you're on the basketball court, you have to be able to play above the rim. Jackson Carpenter takes those basketball traits, puts them on the football field. He is extremely comfortable playing that football when it's in the air, being physical at the catch point, can do a lot of different things too. I think he separates vertically down the field extremely well. Obviously, the top speed helps. Gets his head around, gets upfield, really nice after the catch as well. I see a guy that can win vertically down the field, can win after the catch as well, really smooth with the football in his hands. And you don't see it that much on the film because he's a guy that works vertically, but I think he can do it in terms of winning after the catch. And again, just how comfortable he is with that football in the air, tracking it, the body control, the hand-eye coordination, all things that you want to see from a wide receiver. I think Jackson Carpenter really does excel with. I'm a big fan of Jackson Carpenter. Now, two other conversations that I want to get into for Nebraska. One, you take a look at what they have in this 2025 class, 4 commitments, all from the state of Nebraska. but all guys that, Matt Rhule is kind of betting on the upside there. Jackson Carpenter, we talked about it, phenomenal athletic background. Tyson Terry, a dominant wrestler on the wrestling mat. We saw that kind of help with Nash Hutmaker and what he's done for Nebraska. You see Matt Rhule take guys that play other sports that show that they are elite caliber athletes and we're going to get the best out of that on the football field. But more importantly, the conversation of recruiting the state of Nebraska, you take a look at the in-state talent in this class, it's loaded, right? Christian Jones, Chase Lofton, we just talked about Tyson Terry. Over the past couple of years, Matt Rhule just addressed this in his press conference. I thought it was really insightful. Nebraska has relied on taking a lot of in-state kids as walk-ons. And then you look at what Nebraska's doing, and Matt Rhule said, hey, if we think an in-state kid from Nebraska is worthy of a scholarship early, we're going to offer him the scholarship. You talk about a guy like Jackson Carpenter. He said, hey, we graded him out as a guy that can be a multi-year starter for this program. We're going to give him a scholarship. We're not going to shortchange him and ask him to walk onto this program. We're going to give him a scholarship. I think that's going to help with what Nebraska's doing recruiting the state. If you can land Christian Jones and Chase Lofton, that's going to be massive because I think both of these kids are extremely talented at the top end of that state ranking. Really big fan of what Nebraska's doing on the recruiting trail. It's obviously going to heat up in the summer. We'll continue to talk about it. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.